in teenagerhood is about the time our kids are most driven to accommodate to their culture. You know, you'll notice that your kids say all the time they want to be different. What they actually mean is they want to be different from you, but like all of their friends, right? And the early Christians really struggled with this, is how do they fit in? They don't want to be ostracized. They want their faith to be credible to other people, but they also don't want to be compromised by what doesn't work in society. You know, how do we teach our children to work hard at school and work hard at life so that they'll have some financial stability without loving money and without thinking how much money they make is the most important thing they'll ever do? We see it everywhere, and our goal as people who love our children is to share our faith and love and grace and healing. The only problem is we feel like we have to be hip, cool, and relevant, which may be possible, but I doubt it. And for sure, I don't think it's that helpful. I'm all for relevant, real faith for real life. Nobody has any use, especially teenagers, for pie in the sky by and by. We need to know, where is God in my life right now and why that matters. So maybe you can be faithful and grow spiritually and be cool. I just don't think cool is much of a priority. Now, when I was 13 or 15 or 17 or 22, I thought it was important to be cool. I never succeeded. So it was really good news to me when I began to understand that my worth in the eyes of God had nothing to do with how cool I was. But that's hard. I'm not sure anybody uses the word cool anymore. I suppose it's uncool to say cool. There's another word, and one of you will probably tell me what it is. I had some stepdaughters for about a decade and a half or so. And when Emily was 22, we're driving on some vacation. She's in the back seat, and she says, I want to apologize to you guys. I'm like, for what? She said, well, I thought you were stupid. When I was a teenager in high school, I thought you were stupid. But you're not. Okay, say more about that. Well, it turns out we had a little back and forth, and I kind of guessed it. And I said, well, when you were that age, you thought anybody with two brain cells to rub together would be cool, because the most important thing to be cool is to be cool. And so if you can't figure out how to be cool, then you must be stupid, because everybody wants to be cool, and they're directing all of their brain power to being cool. And then she finally realized that we didn't have the time or the money or the energy to be cool. She's over 40 now, and she's not cool anymore either. It's an inside job. We want our kids to have confidence. We want them to know that they belong in the world, that they're not outsiders to the great, mass of humanity. We want them to have good judgment. We want them to not be unduly swayed by peers who don't have their best interest in heart. But we look at the outside of them, and we are awash in frustration and pity, because most of us didn't navigate our teen years very well either. But it's not their outsides where God is at work. And that's our spiritual work, to recognize that it's not their outsides where God is at work. And that is a kind of spiritual trust that's really hard if you love a teenager. We want our young people to grow self-worth, a heart of compassion, but we don't give them these things. We give them the tools to get them for themselves by how we live. The things that really matter, that we want for them when they're 25 and 35 and 65, what we want most for them, comes from giving them the tools and the freedom to make their own mistakes. Here's a story from one dad I was told about 20 years ago. He said, I was going to work, and Barbara, his 13-year-old daughter, stopped me in tears. My social studies report, I forgot it was due today. It has to be copied. What am I going to do? It's worth half my grade for the term, and it's due first period. Anybody have that experience? Oh, just me then. Okay. Her anguish was genuine, he writes. She was an outstanding student, and this could spoil a 2-year stretch of great grades. Ideas flooded my mind, he said. And then I thought, give her attention, give her concern, but don't solve it for her. Don't jump in and rescue her. Don't solve it for her. Oh, honey, I said, what a bad spot. You've worked so hard, all that time in the library and stuff. And I took a deep breath and reached for her hand, he says, and I don't know what to suggest. I'm sorry, I have an early meeting and I have to go. And I gave her a big hug and smoothed her hair, he said, and then something popped out that was smarter than me and said, you're a bright girl, you'll figure it out. I know you will. And he said, after I did that, I worried all the way to work. And then I thought, better she should have this kind of mistake happen in 7th grade than in college or when she's an adult. When we react to our teenagers' problems as if they were our problems, we interfere with their capacity to experience their own lives. When we jump in to save our kids, and of course, a 12-year-old is different than an 18-year-old at where you jump in. You don't just suddenly at age 12 say, okay, you're on your own. I'll give you food, I'll give you clothes, I'll drive you to work, to school, and that's it. Of course not. In fact, I love that my kids still call me and say, I'm trying to figure something out. Can I bounce some ideas off of you? And we'll talk about that next week, how you respond to that. But it's really easy if you're a parent or if you just love a teenager, the next door neighbor or a niece or a nephew or anything, to panic with them or panic for them. And sometimes we get more panicked when they look less panicked. If we don't see that they're operating under a sufficient amount of panic for the terrible situation they're in, we help panic a little bit. I come by this honestly. I come from a whole family of over-helpers. Offer too much advice, even when it's not asked for, offer too many solutions. And my adult children, well, we'll talk about adults next week. And you'll know that this is a spiritual work for you, that this is some spiritual work you need to do when you feel like panicking over something that isn't actually happening to you. It's happening to someone you love. And that's the love connection, is when they're happy, we're happy. When they're sad, we're sad. When they're panicked, we're panicked. But learning the transition, the spiritual parenting transition from children to adult is learning how to step away and give our children the dignity of owning their own struggles. Obviously, there are exceptions to this. But I don't know are wonderful parenting words. I don't know if your gym clothes will pass for washed. I don't know if you should play on your hurt ankle. I don't know what you should wear to your first prom. The knowledge that we're loved and trusted to make good choices is the biggest gift we can give our kids. And our spiritual work is to work on whatever stands in the way of our kids knowing we trust their good judgment. Up to a point, right? Up to a point. And what we call this is self-discipline. Rather than having obedient children, this is where we want to help our kids learn how to have self-discipline. And I can't tell you how it happened because I did not grow up in a household where we were encouraged to have self-discipline. I grew up in a household where we were encouraged to be obedient to the discipline of the household and the discipline of the culture. But my kids managed to grow up with more self-esteem and more self-confidence than I had. It's great. And I think it's because I started some spiritual work about the time they got into their early teens to begin noticing how I was taking away their dignity every time I helped and they hadn't asked. Because every time I helped or gave them a suggestion and then gave them that suggestion again and then gave them that suggestion again, second time is nagging. Second time is nagging. And I was really good at that. And it didn't help them. I needed to step away. And I've got stories about, learning how to do that. If you believe in a God of love, then you believe every human has worth and dignity. And when you try to live their lives for them, you're telling your children you don't think they have the worth or the intelligence or the strength or the capacity to make choices for themselves. And then, the challenge is, as they're moving from children to adults, is when do you do that? At some point, it's all theirs. It all belongs. I personally think 25 is the cutoff point. After that, you don't get to blame your parents for anything. It's all you now, right? Everyone is entitled to the dignity of their own choices, but these are the years where sometimes you can't let someone make a bad choice because you're still responsible for your 14-year-old. It's really a lifelong project. When we lay the groundwork for our kids to see us do our soul work, our emotional work, they will learn to value that. And I just know this not because I learned it in a book or in a class, but because I learned it in my own life. And I learned it a little later than would have been helpful. I didn't learn it until my kids were in their 20s, and I stopped helping them just because they were sharing a problem. I was one of those parents who, when one of my kids would call and tell me about something we're struggling with, I'd say, I'll write you a check. And then one day I realized, because someone told me, that every time I did that, I was telling my kid, I don't trust you to be able to take care of your own life. So I just decided I would wait until they asked for help. Also, bonus, I wrote fewer checks. So this is our spiritual work in the season of teenagers. First, pray to see yourself as you really are, good and bad. Your kids will tell you all of what you're bad at. Actually, lots of people will tell you that, and you can listen to that. It's information, maybe right, maybe wrong, maybe misguided, maybe insightful. It's just information. Cultivate the relationships where people notice what you're doing right and how good you are. And if your kid once a month says, gee, Mom, you're a real inspiration, and they mean it, take that to the bank. But your capacity to be honest about who you are, your strengths, your shortcomings, and just show how you are asking God to continue helping you grow, it will make a world of difference. And this is the season when we do that. And then the second thing we do is learn to trust God for our own life. I know it sounds simple and it's a great idea, but it's not easy. There's no magic formula for this. You just have to keep doing stuff and trying stuff and doing and trying stuff. And I don't know, maybe you get to perfection. I'll let you know if I get there. It doesn't mean not having structure in your family. It doesn't mean putting up with bad behavior. In a season of discerning one thing at a time, what it's time for you to let go of, that's your spiritual work. And that's where God is there to give you guidance, insight, courage, peace, all the things you need. My personal struggle was with one of my kids who wanted blue hair, or green, or yellow, or black. Safety pins all over their clothes made out of duct tape. PKs have a particularly visible way of wanting to provoke their parents. And she wore that to her dad's church every week. I found it distasteful and kind of a little disturbing. But at the end of the day, I decided it was something for them to figure out for themselves. A messy room, on the other hand, no. The just close the door, Mom. That's not my style. That's my house. I don't want a mess. So, everybody chooses what their battle is going to be. and trusting God that our children's teenage lives won't kill us or them builds a relationship of love and trust. We have to let our kids have their own higher power. They have a God too, and you're not it. So, in the Almost Famous movie, one of the characters drops this little gem. He says, "The only true currency in this bankrupt world is what you share with someone else when you're uncool." Maybe you can make your faith seem cool to your kids, maybe you can't. Maybe someone else will be able to, maybe they won't. Teach them faith anyway, by word and deed. Give them a heart of love and generosity, even when you don't feel like it. Cultivate your highest values in yourselves and expect them to learn from what you do more than what you say. And it may or may not ever be cool. And you may not think they're noticing, but it will be life-giving for you and for them.